Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Batman Arkham Asylum. Hard difficulty, no damage, no upgrades. This is going to be a supercut of all the moments in this game where you can take damage. And a lot of the traversal, a lot of the navigation, a lot of the puzzles, a lot of the other elements that make this such an exceptional title have been trimmed out for convenience here, guys, because this is more of a challenge run than a walkthrough. But if you do watch this, you will get some tips and some strategies and some information that might help you play Batman to a slightly higher level if you're having any problems with it. And it's coming at a good time, because in this year, there's going to be Gotham Knights releasing, which is going to be very much like this, and there's going to be Rocksteady's Suicide Squad game, which could be potentially like this as well. So if you like this type of hero action game, we could be getting a lot more of that this year, and I'm very excited to cover it, and this can be the flagship of doing that. But this is Arkham Asylum. This is probably my favourite Metroidvania, and when I say that, people are going to be shocked and aghast, but what can I say, ladies and gentlemen? I think this game is an absolute masterpiece, and I cannot say enough good things about it, but in this walkthrough you will almost hear me say nothing but bad things. Because one of the problems when you push a game to its limits, and you really get in there and do something difficult, all of the programming, all of the nuance, all of the finesse falls apart, and it turns into some rage-inducing nightmare fuel. But I'm going to do my best to always preface it by saying, guys, I love this game. It is a superb game. I wish we got games like this. We simply don't anymore. And all of the problems with this game were subsequently fixed in the sequels pretty much in as many ways as you can. But in this initial fight here, Joker has us taking on some prisoners, and there is two sequences of introduction, and I'm doing something really particular that you might have noticed. And here's a little challenge for people that want to play along with this run. On this first fight, guys, try to do it without using the ground takedown. Try to do it without using the ground takedown and keep your combo for the entire fight, right? You can let it break in between the spawn of the second enemies, but on that first phase, chain the whole fight, no takedowns, and then on the second fight, do the same thing. And I tell you right now, guys, if you can do that, you can do everything in this game. Because Arkham is such an interesting game. The combat in this is much closer to a rhythm game than it is to a rhythm puzzle game than it is to true action. And you have to understand how to stall and how to position yourself where you maintain your combo, but you have somebody to attack in order to do so. And doing that on that first fight becomes quite bad because you knock everyone away, and sometimes Batman won't go the full distance to get to the enemy that you've knocked away, and other times everyone's on the ground, so Batman will try and attack them and he'll whiff. And it teaches you to do all kinds of different tactics, like doing the stun into the jump over to people to stall for them to stand up, and it's a tricky fight if you do it like that, and I quite enjoyed that particular puzzle, so I do recommend it. And speaking of puzzles, the Caped Crusader gets to do his first instance here of saving people, and there was an achievement in the original run of this game where if you saved all these people in this room, I think you got something. So feel free to do that, and then throw the Batarang at the device that's just in that office over there. And then it's going to get rid of the gas, and we can move on. So Arkham Asylum is my favourite Arkham game. I think the elegance in this game is unmatched. It has such a good setting. It has such a fully realised setting, and the way that they use it, I think, is interesting and unique, and they're constantly adjusting it to keep it fresh. I think they pretty much made the greatest superhero game that exists. And it has to be said, one aspect of the game that's aged is its combat. And especially if you do this no upgrade run stuff, because it definitely changes some things that play a lot better when you've got certain skills. But what they did with Asylum, I think they never managed to recapture with the games that followed, because the games went wider scope, they went a lot more diluted, and they were still very good and of high quality. But this game, to me, it flows like Die Hard does. It has this wonderful sense of its established setting, and it uses it as best as it can, and I really appreciate that. But this is our first fight with a Titan. Titans are kind of interesting in this game, because they're not difficult, but they will cause havoc because of how annoying they can be. And the basic strategy on this enemy is to wait for him to charge, throw the Batarang, and then either sprint or roll to the side and then punish him. The problem when he isn't stunned is if you start to attack him, he has hyper armor and he goes into some pretty interesting swings that are quite fast. And you can attack him and kind of dance in between him, but every so often you get to a point where you're going to get roll catched or you're going to get tripped. And that particular ground shockwave just then has a nuclear hitbox, so don't be anywhere near it. There's times when it's really kind, and there's times when it hits you from 3 meters away, and I have no idea why, so always try to be away from it if you can. And then you simply stun him, hit him at least 4 to 6 times, move away, and then repeat. And if you want to keep your combo here, there's a couple of things you can do. There's some certain Titan exploits, Titan loops you can use. But my rules for this particular run as well, guys, is I wanted to try to keep a flawless freestyle for all of the fights that were fun. And my rulings for that were, I wasn't going to do any of the Titans, because the Titans get really complicated and those fights take ages to do because it's so easy to make mistakes, especially with no upgrades. I wasn't going to do any of the bosses, because some of the bosses are incredibly tricky to fully chain, and then there's 1 or 2 fights where I think you can chain them all completely, but I don't want to be the guy to find it out. I just wanted to do this as a whimsical project. I really love this game. I haven't played it in at least 2 or 3 years, and I thought I'd come back and share it with you guys. So you will see me keep a full combo for almost every fight in the game, and I'm going to do my best to do so and make it as interesting as possible. Because no upgrades is exactly what it means, guys. We're going to start this game with exactly what we finished this game with. The only difference will be our arsenal will increase, because Batman goes to the Batcave and gets a couple of gadgets. But to give you an idea of how limited you are in this run, you will never get access to critical hits, so you'll never be able to use timing to do extra damage and get extra combo. You will never have access to an invincible grapple animation. So the only grapple that you have is the ground takedown, and it's one of the only vulnerable takedowns you do. So if you do that move and somebody punches you, you will take damage and you will lose. Additionally, if you throw a Batarang mid-combo, it will ruin your combo. You cannot use Batarangs at all for combo purposes without breaking your combo. You can use the Batclaw, and I recommend that you do, because I think the Batclaw is one of the best weapons in the game. That being said, do not use the Batclaw too much on the Joker fight at the end, because there is some really unfortunate detection in that room, and it leads to me nearly headbutting my monitor and diving out my window. But this room here in Intensive Treatment is quite famous. It's one of the first of the Predator sequences. Arkham is elegant. Look at that, by the way. You're going to see that a lot. So I'm playing this game at 240 FPS. This game, when it came out, was probably 30. I don't think the physics were ever really designed around that. So every so often, really weird things happen when the ragdoll takes place, and you get some stratospheric nonsense. It's beautiful, and I hope you enjoy it. But the waltz of Arkham is an intricate duet of Predator and combat rooms, and then you'll do some traversal, you'll do some exposition, you'll do some of the further elaborations, you'll do some extra traversal and maybe a mild bit of puzzle traversal, and then you'll come back into either a fight or into a sequence like this. And this right here is a great example of Arkham being Arkham. I wouldn't change it for the world, but it's going to happen. And then we have this fellow over here. So all I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm going to isolate them and take them down. These early challenges aren't too bad because they don't have any of the defense mechanisms they're going to have later on. But it's a good opportunity to practice this because you're going to need to know how to do it. You do this a lot in these games, and if you're going to play the whole series, by the end of it, you're going to be an old pro. If you have upgrades, you can do inverted takedowns, you can do all kinds of fun shenanigans, you can throw a boomerang that disables people. There is a lot of fun to be had. This game came out, what, 2009? 2009, this game came out, guys, and it is, for me, it is one of those special releases that when it came out, it was exactly everything I wanted it to be, if not better. And can you say that you've heard me say that for quite a long time? I don't think I've ever said that, right? It's been a long time since I've said that because gaming, unfortunately, is seemingly on a steady decline. Oh, watch this, by the way. This is just perfect, this. This is so perfect. And then just then, I press the wrong button to backclaw up there, and I throw a boomerang, and the guy hears it. What a comedy of errors. And you might be wondering, Chris, why didn't you restart and do this again? This was one and done, guys. All pretty much the Predator missions on this walkthrough are going to be one and done. I did not want the Predator missions to be the focus of this guide. You can do some really cool and really fancy and really elaborate and really just intricate stuff with that. You can turn it into a chain reaction room if you want. And that's super cool if you're interested in that, but I came to this to fight. I am a fighter. And this is me chaining together a bunch of the sequences where you have to fight, / you can potentially take damage. And then we come into this second area of Arkham here, where we have to get access to the Batmobile. And we're going to be fighting a bunch of weapons, and this introduces you to enemies with some weapons. So, the weapons in this game are really fascinating to me, because they prioritize quite highly in the behavior of the enemies. For some reason, every so often, the enemies will just go, I want to grab a weapon. So he'll go on a little adventure, run all the way to where they are, and then he'll slowly pick it up, and then it'll give you kind of a signifier that he has the weapon, and then he'll come for you, and then he'll have a move with a bit more extra range. And on the surface, a man with a pipe sounds scarier than a man without a pipe, right? But in this game, it doesn't really work that way. So when they go to grab the weapon, they're all so distracted you can just get free damage on them, and then when they have the weapon itself, it's not that fast to really be any kind of threat. But this is the first checkpoint of the game that's a bit iffy. You come over towards this particular area, and then you have to kill a bunch of guys up here, and this is quite claustrophobic, this fight, and every so often Batman will just not detect. It's going to be the lamentation of the entire walkthrough. The combat when you don't have upgrades is weird, because one of the things that happens to Batman when his multiplier goes up is he gains momentum. And you'll notice I'm a little bit faster right now than I was when I'm first punching, and I get all this incredible range where I'm dancing back and forth and knocking around and going all kinds of acrobatic. That's really cool, but it's kind of sluggish. And it's kind of sluggish because we're used to later games where they made it a lot more streamlined and a lot quicker. And this game introduces this slow motion feature where Batman's sometimes going to slow motion when he swings. But it doesn't seem like the enemies share this tendency at times. So Batman will do a super slow motion jumping elbow, and a guy will just jab him. And it's super frustrating because you can't control any of it unless there's some esoteric technology that I've not discovered. And it leads you to wondering why Rocksteady didn't put in a feature where you could select the chain of combos that Batman does. I have got no problems with putting in a system the final hit on an enemy that's about to kill him is a spinning kick. I think that could be a cool ender, that could be a really nice feature. But I don't want my first few hits to go into a spinning kick. I don't want him to do, like, sweeps. I don't want him to do jumping elbows. I want him to do that fucking elbow and that punch and that cock punch. I want the fast moves that make me effective and keep me in the game. And this game is completely random, seemingly. So Batman dynamically does what he wants to do, depending on what's going on. And a lot of the times, it's not a problem. If you're not doing no damage, it's never a problem, because you'll just take a punch and it'll be like a video game and you'll get on with your life. But when you're trying to do flawless fights, and Batman does the wrong move and chooses a really slow move, like a Tekken sweep, and you immediately get a Street Fighter jab in your mouth, it feels like you're being cheated. And it leads me to something that I never thought I'd say, which is, I think that the RNG in this game is one of the worst I've come across. And I'm not a speedrunner, and I know that there's obviously a million games worse than this for randomness, but when it comes to what I do, which is making these projects, the randomness of Batman and the enemies and just what was happening in this run was so off the charts at times. It was like a comedy. It was like a Greek tragedy / comedy. It was very strange. And there were times, like on a fight like this, guys, I'd press backwards and punch towards that black dude, and Batman would do the elbow, but he wouldn't jump towards him. So he'd just elbow thin air, no one was there, and I dropped my combo. And in my footage when I was editing, folks, I had more instances where Batman did the wrong thing and whiffed and like got stuck on a wheelchair or got stuck on a desk than I got hit. And I never anticipated that. Because I thought of this idea when my internet went out. I should do Arkham. I've never done Arkham Asylum. I've done all the rest. I should go back to Arkham. I should do something dumb. So I was thinking, no damage, clearly. No damage is going to be a staple. No upgrades could be interesting. Can I do no upgrades? Is it too hard? And my thought process immediately went to the elevator room with the Titan. Elevator room with the Titan's the hardest fight in this game, casually, in my opinion. There's a bunch of other fights that are tricky for different reasons, but that one is the one that stands out to me. That was the one on my first playthrough. I used health upgrades to give me a heal during that fight, because it was tricky. So I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking of Bane. I'm thinking of how much I hate Croc and how much I hate the bosses in this game, because they're all gimmick fights that go way too long and you can't skip them. I'm thinking of all the things that could frustrate me and how it could be tricky. I'm thinking of the double Titan before Joker, even though that room is amazing, so it's not even a problem. You know, I'm thinking of all these things. I never anticipated that fighting Batman was going to be the hardest part of this run. And when you have upgrades, I do think it gets a lot better. I think he gets a lot more fluid, a lot more streamlined, and he feels a lot more satisfying. And I know in the sequels that they made it a lot better, because Arkham Knight, I think, a lot of people say Arkham Knight's not a great game because of X reasons, but the combat's the best the combat's ever been, and it's phenomenal. Speaking of phenomenal, this is an amazing fight, but shout out to that wheelchair to the left of me there. I got stuck on that wheelchair while doing a punch towards a guy, and Batman was in like an infinite kicking animation, wedged in the wheelchair, and a guy ran up behind me and punched me in the back of the head. Ooh, and this room has got an interesting technology as well. Look at the floor. Can you hear the tiles breaking every time somebody falls down and the debris flying up? This room has a dynamic floor, which I think is the coolest thing, and I completely forgot that they did that. So every time you land, and every time you knock someone down, the tiles get kicked up and the texture changes. And it's such a subtle thing. This, to me, is what video games are all about. It's the beauty and the simplicity of something that's just pure awesomeness. And that fight is awesome. Really fun fight. Really cool sequence. And then here we have the high security henchmen. These guys are chained up like Hannibal Lecter and they carry knives. The knife is a really dangerous tool. And in this game there is no knife counter, which is kind of funny because the first thing I tried to do to that guy is knife counter him. And it doesn't exist on this game. They introduce that later on. So if you want to fight that enemy, you want to double jump over him and hit him from behind, or you want to hit him with your cape and hit him afterwards. The game teaches you to stun that enemy and hit him, but I think you can do the standard jump over him and punch him in the back. And you'll notice when you see an Arkham Asylum player on Arkham City, because they won't do the knife. They won't do that knife dance. They'll just do the tech they've always done when they were grinding the missions and playing this game. And then we have the first Scarecrow sequence, so I need to talk about this, guys, because I think a few people are going to take it the wrong way. I think Arkham Asylum has some of the worst bosses ever put in a video game. I think they're absolutely terrible, they annoy me, they frustrate me, and they're only good the first time you do them. And I truly believe this. I'm not saying this to be some kind of polemic. I'm saying this because I truly feel it. And I think Scarecrow looks cool in this, and I think this sequence, the first time you do it, is legitimately unique. But the third time you do it, on the 5th run you've done, this is just balls. Because it's hide and seek, and it's a pattern, and if you learn the pattern, it's just repeat pattern. And I know you can say that about everything in video games, but this is not even dynamic enough to give you the illusion that anything is different. So it's essentially a Splinter Cell sequence, and it's not very interesting, and I really wanted to fight him. And later on, in games like Arkham Origins, they made the bosses a lot more about the combat, which is the best part of this game, in my opinion. So for the bosses in this to all be so unique and so features, they are one and dones. They are completely disposable. They are bosses that are designed for the new player to go, ooh, ah, but they're not designed for replays. And the biggest example of this is the Scarecrow sequences and Croc. Because those segments, once you understand them, are a literal waste of your time for nothing else. Because nothing happens. Especially Croc. Croc's the one that I'd just remove. I think Croc is terrible. And it sucks as well, because later on in the other games, you do fights against Croc, and he's actually kind of fun, and I like him. And I think Arkham Origins is the worst Arkham game. I'm not going to get into that because I don't want to upset anybody, but I just think it's objectively true. However, it has the best bosses. And it has the best bosses because you fight them. And it's all I wanted. But in this room, Harley is going to do a very interesting trap. If you get discovered here, they will end this by executing the prisoner, I believe. So you want to take everybody out quietly, and you want to get up there, and you want to stop that from happening. And when you do this, it triggers a cutscene of Batman coming through the glass, which is one of my favourite animations in the game. And can we just say, guys, how amazing does this game look? This game now is like 13 years old. It's been played on PC. This is the original version. It's not returned to Arkham. And it looks absolutely amazing. I really, really love it. And then we have Bane. Bane is interesting. Bane was one of my favourite Batman characters when I was a kid. I had a comic with Bane in it. He didn't look like this. He actually looked cool. This looks like He-Man on like super roids, wearing some kind of Ratchet and Clank outfit. But the concept here is very simple. The problem with this fight is that there's no checkpoint. You have to do all 3 phases on the same hit. And Bane is a bit of a troll, let's be fair to him, yeah? He will not do what you want him to do. He will constantly taunt, he will constantly start trying to walk and chase you, he'll constantly try throwing debris at you. You want him to charge you. If he charges you, you get what you want. If you go near him, when he's in one of those other patterns that aren't helpful, you can pull his aggro and make him come towards you, and maybe he'll charge you, but a lot of the times, he kind of does what he wants. If you get a charge, that's exactly what you want, and be very careful dodging like this. I recommend running instead of dodging because you have more control over it, and sometimes Batman picks like a goofy angle and you still get hit. But as you get to the second phase, Joker sends in some henchmen, and you can just kill these guys. You can just beat them up, and then, you know, Bane's going to throw stuff at you, and you can get all up into that. I wanted to do something a little different. That was really lucky right there. I wanted to see if I could kite the enemies, and if you could just use sprint to kind of focus purely on Bane. And that's exactly what I did here. And it broke my combo, which is sucky for me. But fundamentally, you don't have to do any fighting in this room, really. You can just wait for him to charge, make sure you throw the boomerang, and then just circle the room. And it completely circumnavigates the need to worry about any of the combat. And this was the best strategy I could come up with, because everything else involved knowing what you're doing and just fighting everybody, which is a good strategy, don't get me wrong, and it's fun to watch. But this is a walkthrough too, and I wanted to bring something to the plate that you might not have seen before. I checked a bunch of runs after I'd recorded this, and most of the runs on YouTube had people just fighting in this room. So, if anything, I can say that this added a slightly different perspective on the fight, even if it is a bit more of like a no-roll Bloodborne fight now. And this is all you do. Just keep sprinting around in a circle, and then hope that Bane plays along, which he almost never does. And this gives me an opportunity to talk about some stuff I've done with the game, which you might have noticed if you know it. So the GOG port of Batman Arkham Asylum is okay, but it's not great. It suffers from, it came out in 2009, and anything that came out in 2009 is usually pretty rough. But people have done fan mods, and they've completely changed the launcher so that the launcher's way better. And they've added a ton of features that enable you to get some really, really nice stuff. So you can make all the reses what you want, you can crank all the graphics, you can have it boot in the correct way, you can turn off a bunch of settings, you can also change the FOV, which is what I'm doing right now. So if you look at this, guys, and you think, wow, that looks kind of pulled out, even though it doesn't pull out that far, all considered, it is on a strictly higher FOV. And there's two things I had to do, a little bit of shenanigans to make this work. The FOV is a toggle, and it isn't permanent. Every single time you load in, you have to change the FOV by pressing F, I think it's F9. And that's really annoying, and I was forgetting to do it. So what I did was, I downloaded an automatic key presser piece of software that constantly presses a key that you can program, and I programmed it to press F9. So if you ever see when I'm playing, guys, if you see it go from a controller input, because I'm playing on controller, if you see it go to unassigned, that's every time that software presses F9, because the game thinks I've suddenly switched to playing on keyboard, but I haven't. And that enables it so that I don't have to keep pressing that key, and it pulls the FOV out for me. And then you get to see the game in a slightly different measurement. And then the other thing that I did, guys, which was using a config edit, I went in and I enabled to change the HUD, and I enabled the key that lets you disable it, which is F12. And what that does is, if you look in the top left right now, the game will always tell you that you have an upgrade, and it will always put that bat emblem on, much like on Arkham City, where it goes level up on your map and you can't tell where you're supposed to bloody go. This is one of the huge problems with the Arkham series in that regard. They never anticipated people would avoid upgrades, so they put this HUD on there and it never goes away, and there doesn't seem to be a setting to get rid of it. So I came in and I have a toggle now to remove the HUD. So if you ever see me running around and you can't see that, it's because my HUD is toggled off. So right now, this fight is me forgetting to toggle the HUD on. And I want to always have the HUD on for the fight so you can see the combos. But I have to press a key while fighting, which is kind of awkward. So at the end of this, you'll see it come back. So I kicked that guy. Oh, you didn't see it come back, but usually it comes back. And then there, it is back. But do you see it on the screen, guys? It's always there. I could not have done this if that was always there, because it pissed me off so much, I literally found a way to get around it. And taught myself how to do it. You know, you've just got to do it, you know? But let's talk about this game, guys. Let's talk about some of the more exploitable aspects of Batman's combat. Batman's combat is incredibly easy to manipulate, and I'm going to try my best not to do it. You'll notice here, guys, I'm trying to beat people to the punch, I'm countering, I'm trying to use different moves, I'm trying to use risky moves, I'm trying to make the fights exciting. You can jump over people infinitely in this game, keep your combo, and be completely invincible. You can do that if you want to. It's boring to watch, and why would you do that? I don't really understand, but it's safe and it works. You can jump up, like just then, see this? You can do that endlessly. You can just jump over everybody, stay safe, and the moment you get enough space, you can punch them. You can also do an even stronger strategy, which is to jump over a ton of people to make them flinch, and then jump away from them so that you've got quite some separation, and they're all grouped over there, and then you punch backwards, hit one, jump away, punch backwards, hit one, jump away, and you can chain that for an entire fight, killing everybody, and they're not even close enough to hit you. You can do that if you want to. I will not judge you for doing that. I just want you to know, I know you can do these things. I know all about the safety strats in Arkham, the things that kind of ruin the combat and make people say it's too easy. I'm going to choose not to do that. You can, if you want to, guys, stand in the group of enemies and just counter everybody. You'll keep a combo as well if you're good at it. If you're bad at it, you'll drop your combo, but you will be completely safe because the enemies can't do anything. You could stand countering everybody and you'll be fine. But who wants to do that, you know? The biggest issue with this run... Oh, we got the backclaw now as well, guys. Really, really useful. That is such a good move. But the biggest problem with doing no upgrades is it makes the game look less fun. And I don't want anybody to watch this and go, oh my god, this Batman game looks sick, how have I not played this? And then think that you can't do anything. You can, guys. The stuff you can do in this, I got so sad just thinking about throwing people. Just thinking about grappling to get rid of people and getting those precious iframes. I got so sad at the idea of losing the damage you get when you use counter hits. When you time your button presses, guys, on the combos and you get counter hits, you get double damage, I think. Double damage. You should see how much I have to hit people in this guide. When we get to some of the bigger fights and I have to combo people several times, like, you have to hit dudes so much unless you do that takedown. And the takedown's so dangerous, a lot of the times you'll get hit. And if you're playing along with this, guys, and you say, dude, every time you do the takedown, no one punches you. Every time I do it, they punch me. What's going on? All that's happening is you don't see the 50 times they punched me when I got too aggressive with the takedown. That's all it is. Because that's the game, you know? The game's super random. Sometimes you do that takedown and everybody watches. Sometimes you do that fucking takedown, everyone gets red eyes and they all laser beam directly to you and jab you instantly. There doesn't seem to be any kind of consistency. And that's the reason why I said I think this game is super random. And I never even would have thought, if you'd have said to me, Chris, what do you think is a random game? I would never have said this. I would have said like Ninja Gaiden. Because that game, everything happens differently every time you play it, you know? There's a lot of games that have that inherent randomness, but this wasn't one of them. But as soon as I started doing this project, the amount of times... Like, I have a piece of footage, guys, where Batman does a different move, like 5 times in a row after his opening combo, and each time he does it, it's too slow to beat the enemy I'm trying to attack. Like, you couldn't even make it up. It's hilarious. It's so funny to me that that's even a thing. Like, look at this, though. Look at how cool these moves are. The animations look amazing. The stuns look amazing. There's so much visual language going on. And if you're wondering where the counter symbol is, guys, on hard difficulty on Asylum, you do not see the counter symbol with the bats. On the later games, they changed that to New Game Plus, which I don't really understand why they did that. It just kind of confused it, but... Now we have a couple of snipers up here with G36s. We're going to take them down with a big old dirty takedown, and then we're going to probably use the balcony here to go and grab the other guy. Everything about this game is superb. Just the sense of the universe, the utilization of the license. Joker in this game is phenomenal. You know, Batman in this game is phenomenal. Everything is just, it's so stellar. And when you come back to it, you remember just how great it is. And I do have some grievances when it comes to how they handled the Return to Arkham stuff. And I haven't played those games, but I know that they're not the best. But the thing that I don't really understand, and if I'm incorrect here, guys, please tell me what's real. Can you imagine if they'd have gone back to the original games and given them all Arkham Knight's combat? Given them all those features and all those wonderful tools that you can use? Can you imagine how much fun that would have been? And how cool it would have been to come back? They could have even edited the game, you know? They could have made it a toggle. Do you want to do Arkham Knight combat or Arkham Asylum toggle? You know, for the people that are purists? And when you toggle to Arkham Knight, it changes the encounters. It adds enemies. It adds the new enemy types that are in the later games. Like, can you imagine that? Dudes coming up with shields, dudes coming up with all the body armor on them that you need to do the beatdown on. Like, there's so many things that they added to the game that made it so much more interesting to play. Watch this, by the way. If this is what I think it is, this is Arkham in a nutshell right now. I want to drop down here, guys, and take these two guys out, and watch this. It was a perfect drop, and then it wasn't. And then I'm just in this Assassin's Creed climbing comedy of errors. And then the AI is so bad, apparently, that I get away with it. And that made the video. That made the video, guys. Just imagine. Imagine some of the cool shit that you're going to miss out on, and then imagine how dog shit that looked. That was dumb, right? But so beautiful. There's also a really cool transition in this game. I think it's when you die. When you die, there's a flock of bats that fly across the screen, and it does a transition to a dark screen where Joker taunts you. And it's a really cool death screen, actually. I really like it. And if you turn off the hood, you can't see any of the stuff, and it makes it look really cinematic, which is really nice. Turning off the hood leads to some really cinematic stuff. It's beautiful. But that vignette... I say vignette, sorry, it's not a vignette. But that transition is amazing. And what I wanted to do when I was thinking about how to use this is a really hard fight, by the way, guys. This is one of the hardest fights in the game under these stipulations. Keeping a combo in this fight is a nightmare. The enemies are so close together, and unless you do a lot of jumping over people, like I mentioned, with the more exploitative strategies, there's almost nothing... That right there was an input error. Ooh, I need to talk about that, and I'd forgot. I'm so glad that happened. But going back to that transition, I wanted to isolate where the flock goes across the screen and use that to cut between the encounters in this guide, and I think that would have been really beautiful. But it turns out I couldn't crop it in Premiere the way I needed to make it look good, and I wasn't going to mess around with the masks in Premiere because it's kind of awkward and it takes way too long and it's nowhere near as efficient. That's one of those things, guys, where if you have After Effects, it would have been relatively simple. Just frame by frame, you would have rotoscoped everything except for the bats away using masks. And then after you did that, it would have just had that transition and you would have rendered it, isolated it, and then you could have put it on the video and it would have worked for everything you needed to, and it would have just been a drag and drop. But unfortunately I don't have After Effects, and a couple of times I've tried to grab it, it has led to going through a bunch of tutorials to install it, to make sure that it works, and then for some reason it doesn't work. So instead I just linked a bunch of things with some interesting moments. But the buffer in this game, the input buffer, for people who don't know, guys, video games have a window where when you press a button, when something else is happening, it dictates whether or not that button comes out or that button stacks or what behavior happens when you press that button. And when you hear people say things I was buffering, it means they were pressing the move early so that it guaranteed it came out when they got access back to their character. And in this game, guys, the buffer is absurd. You literally have to button mash to get things out in this game at times, and I don't remember that. I don't know if it's because I'm on PC and I'm used to a lot more precise and responsive controls. I don't know if the engine is just a little bit archaic at this point, and it just doesn't work too well. But what I can tell you is the amount of times that I double tapped to counter when I was in an animation right at the end of it when I was supposed to press my button, and then I came out of the animation, Batman stood there and got punched in the face because I didn't press it enough times. And you can really try and press it at the right time, but because the buffer is so interesting, there were times where I tried to press it just once at a very precise time at the end, and nothing came out. So it leads you to tap, 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 tap. As soon as Batman starts doing it, you stop tapping. Tap, 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 tap. As soon as Batman starts doing it, you stop tapping. And that's just how you play. And I think most of us do that. We've kind of got used to it and accepted it, and we just go with it. But I haven't played one of these games in a while. I've not played one of these games since Arkham Knight. And I just didn't remember it being that way. And in this game, it is incredibly noticeable, and it led to a bunch of times where I pressed something and Batman didn't do it. And I don't want to blame the game, guys. I don't want to say, you know, oh, the game's crap and I'm infallible. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I've played every Arkham game. I've got the achievements on Arkham Asylum, the 1000G on this game, like 5 times. I've got the Riddler trophies like 10 plus time, all of them. I know these games. I've done all the challenges. I've got all the 3 stars on all the challenges, on all the games. You know, I've done them on the hardest difficulty. I've done walkthroughs for them. I know how to play Arkham. So when I press a button and Batman doesn't do it, I get salty. But this is a Predator sequence, and this is the first sequence where when you start taking people down, he starts to notify them because they have these collars with their vitality on them. And I'm just going to use that to my advantage, and I'm going to show you the strategy that I always use in Arkham, which is the bat claw into the fatal fall. So the middle of this room has some of these stacks, these shelving units, these drawers, whatever you want to call them, filing cabinets. You can stand on top of this, and you can pull enemies over the railing, and if they fall over the railing, they're knocked out. This is one of the best strategies to get rid of enemies without really earning it. A lot of people like to use things like the gel. They like to just use, you know, like the dive kick and stuff and divide and then run away with the gargoyles. I like to use the bat claw. The bat claw, to me, is quintessential Michael Keaton. Think about those movies, dudes, when he like fires the bat claw and the guy goes, "You missed," and then he just wrenches the wire and it pulls the concrete out and knocks him out. Stuff like that, to me, is what makes Batman so special and makes him one of my most beloved characters when I was a kid. And here we go, the second shittest checkpoint. So this checkpoint here, guys, is so bad, I had to manipulate it. So after you do the entire sequence after this, and they kick the door open and trigger the next fight, run past the enemies, go back where you came from, into the vent, and it will trigger a checkpoint so that when you come back here, you can fight these enemies. If you don't, you have to fight those guys at the door, open the vent, go in that room, solve a fucking mystery clue with Velma and the Scooby-Doo gang, and then listen to a cutscene, then come out, trigger the door, and start that fight. And this is not a difficult fight, guys, but I kept getting awkward shit where Batman did goofy stuff and missed. And I repeated it like 3 times, and I was getting so fucking pissed off, I had to manipulate the checkpoint, so feel free to do so, because it's just lame. And on the smaller encounters, it's a really good idea to knock everybody down and then execute them. If you can do that, you'll have the most success. And then when you leave that area, we go into the second nightmare with Scarecrow. This one involves using the Batclaw to wrench down this box. And you want to be kind of careful with some of the detection here, because there's times when it looks like you can go, and then when you try and go, you end up getting caught even though you're in cover. So there's some generous detection on some of this. Don't get too overzealous. And it makes me wonder as well, you know, if you had the bat line on this segment, do you think you could use the line to just scoot across the whole thing and skip most of this? I wonder if you can do that on New Game Plus, because you probably can. I don't mind this nightmare as much because there's a little bit of fighting, but there's going to be a transition here, guys. The transition coming up just then was because I ran forward to do the combat and I jumped into the light and it penalizes you. So don't do that. Yeah, he doesn't like it when you do that. And as you can see, I'm just balls to the wall. But this part right here is one of the things that really makes me sad about the Arkham series on PC. So did you see Batman turn into Scarecrow? I would have loved to do this whole walkthrough playing as Scarecrow, and you probably can. But I would have liked his moveset to be different. It's just a palette swap, isn't it, that? And in the later games, they have all these characters with all these different movesets, but you can't really use them outside of free roam with some of the mods. I always wanted the ability to play all the characters in the campaign. And if you could do that, guys, I probably would have done walkthroughs with every character. And I know that sounds exhausting and terrible, and I'd do one, it'd do pretty well on YouTube, and then every single thing after that would do worse and worse and worse, and you'd be so exhausted and so just in hell, in Arkham hell, of seeing the same thing repeated. But I'd still love to do it, you know? And I think what I'd do is I'd space it out so that you wouldn't see them, and I'd release them every so many few months. And then you'd be like, oh yeah, we can see Arkham again, and it's fun. But I'd love to do that. I'd love to do it with Arkham Knight, and you can actually do it with Arkham Knight. It's just, it involves doing all the mods and stuff, and at the moment, there's Elden Ring around the corner, guys. We're 6 days away from Elden Ring, and who knows, maybe I won't like Elden Ring and I don't really play it, and I end up playing a bunch of Arkham, because that sounds like something I would do. You might have noticed this, guys. I'm not very good at doing the thing I should do, ever. I'm just that weird guy, and I don't want to be. I just can't help myself. It's like self-sabotage. I just don't understand. Like, Sifu's just come out, right? It's a really good game. Super good game, really cool setting, really cool mechanics, really cool features. I should be playing that game. I should be talking on a walkthrough I've made for that game, and you guys should be all excited to go see it because it's new and it's hard. Guess what? I don't like it. I don't like the format it's setting. I don't like the no checkpoints. And because of that, I don't want to play it. And it's really sad, because the game is awesome, but the way it's set up is dog shit. And right now, instead of covering a game that's just come out, that's really hot and everyone's interested in, that's legitimately difficult and needs a guide maker, I'm covering a game from 13 years ago that I absolutely love that no one cares about. And it just is. It is what it is. I'm not good at this. I'm just good at making bad decisions. Be very careful doing that. Whenever you backclaw guys with electric batons, if they touch you, it hurts. And then we have this goofy Zsasz moment, so I always remember this, but I never remember what you're supposed to do. And then on the screen it tells you, doesn't it? Aim the Batarang, and when he points his head out, you can throw it at him. But it takes ages to do it. And I always think, I don't know if you're like me, guys, when this is happening, I always think I'm doing something wrong. And then eventually he has a peer, doesn't he? And then you hit him and it's over. But up until that moment, I'm sitting there thinking, what's going on? And there it is, boom. And you've won. And it's very simple. And then you do a little bit of a fight in this room. I love this room, by the way. Can we just say how amazing the detail and just the aesthetic of this game is? This game is not using, like, crazy up-resed textures or anything, I don't believe. And it still has managed to look this good just by using my hardware and just the benefit of time. What a beautiful game. And I think I should talk about the comment I made at the start, which is really going to get to the Symphony of the Night bros, isn't it, I would imagine. So my favourite Metroidvania, not being Metroid or Castlevania, is probably controversial to some people, but not to others. And it stems from fatigue, guys. I played a lot of Castlevania when I was a kid. I got the games on the Game Boy, and I played a ton of Game Boy Advance Castlevanias, Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, Aria of Sorrow, so on and so forth. That because I played so much of them, and to give you some context, I played those games without the internet. So when you got lost on those games, you wandered around like a dickhead for weeks, until you found the secret wall or the path you didn't see. So I have a lot of time in those games of me wandering around being lost, and I've probably spent a decade being lost in Castlevania. Even though it's not that long, it's probably like 3 to 4 years, but it felt longer, you know, at the time. So for me, I've almost ruined Castlevania for myself. I still love it, and I still like to play it occasionally as almost like a nostalgia trip. But when Castlevania games come out, or Castlevania clones come out, I can't get behind them, because it just reminds me of early 2000s. Oh, there was a physics bug, did you see it? That was awesome. This is a really fun fight, this one too. And we got the good ender there. But we're backtracking here to go to the Penitentiary, because I believe this is where Harley is, and she's holding... isn't she holding... what's his name? Quincy? Quincy's so cool in this game. I love his story arc, when you find out all the lore about him. This was risky. That's something to talk about too. Whenever I do a ground takedown and an enemy runs towards me, guys, I'm always mashing counter, because you can get out of it and recover quick enough to immediately counter, and you've seen me do it a few times. However, if you're too early in that animation and they're too quick to attack you, you will always take damage. It's confirmed. And as far as Metroid goes, do you want to hear something that's absolutely sacrilegious? I have never played a Metroid game. I know, right? It's bad. It's really bad. I had the NES or the Super Nintendo box that had the Metroid game on the back, and I used to look at that picture of Samus and those colours and that like black screen, and I used to fantasize about that game when I was younger, something fierce, and then I just never got the opportunity to play it. I've seen it played from start to finish several times at like marathons at AGDQ and whatnot. I've played... What was that Metroid on the Game Boy where like there was a corrupt suit? I forget the name of it. Aiden bought it. This is an interesting fight coming up here. Shout out to that middle thing. Whatever this is here, this railing in the middle, it is going to get in Batman's way when you try to punch dudes. That I restarted about 7 times because I just couldn't hit people and he kept getting cock-blocked by that middle thing. So I'm going to do everything I can to have that not happen. However, also, you can knock people over it as they fall down, and it's a really, really good cinematic ender. And I did a fight here, guys, where I got one of those, and then I got punched on this next encounter. And also, linking these two fights together is kind of awkward, because they're so close together that if you try to punch and you get the wrong move, or you punch the wrong guy and they don't do what you want, you'll just get hit. But have fun linking those two fights. Waiting on that spawn and getting that back claw, or doing whatever it is that you want to do. The amount of times I hit the wrong guy, and when I tried to get out of it, Batman dropped the combo, it was so frustrating. And the weapon crate as well. If he opens that weapon crate, bad things happen. Luckily, they're also infatuated by weapons crates. You can use them to your advantage to get all kinds of chaos going and just beat them up. But I played a Game Boy Metroid game for like an hour or two, and it seemed pretty cool. And I heard it was a good Metroid game. And then I played a bunch of Metroid Prime at launch on the... Was it on the GameCube, that game? And I didn't really like it. And I know you're probably even more shocked at that because everybody loves Metroid Prime. These guys are a pain in the ass, by the way, and Batman turns so fucking slow, and you can't change the sensitivity on the camera, so you can't even turn the camera quickly in this game, which is really dumb. So right here, this is all luck. All I wanted to do then was turn the camera, guys, but the game literally wouldn't let me. And if you wondered why it was that close, it's just... There's no modern sensibility with the camera in this game. You just have to put up with it. And then we have this fight. This fight is one of the challenge maps, and it's a really cool fight. And if you have the throw ability, you can throw people out of the ring here, which I absolutely adore doing, but I can't do it. And this is one of those where I don't keep the full combo on this encounter, because this encounter gets really crazy really quick. And whenever the floor glows like this, you have to leave. And when you're climbing, you drop your combo. So I kind of don't get how you're meant to link this. And I should go and watch Godfather's walkthrough, because Godfather Dictator did a no damage run of this game about 10 years ago. It's a super sick run. You should absolutely watch it. And if anybody can chain this room, it will be him. And that's the kind of thing that he does, you know, that's Godfather all over there, and that's one of the reasons I love the guy. Because when I thought about chaining this room, I just said, fuck that noise. Fuck that noise, dude. I've got places to be, I've got shit to see. Godfather's like, hold my fucking beer, I'm doing it 10 years ago. But this is a very, very difficult room as well. It's a difficult room just to do, and it's a difficult room to chain. So just be very careful and understand weird shit's gonna happen. Really weird shit. But talking about Metroid Prime, the reason I didn't like it, guys, is because all the shooters at that point let you aim for yourself. And they did have aim assist, obviously, because N64 and whatnot had aim assist, and even GameCube had aim assist. But I was so used to feeling like I was in control. In Metroid Prime, when it used that weird lock-on system, it felt like the game was playing itself, and I didn't like it. I appreciate that game is awesome. I went back and played it, and it's a really clever game with some cool stuff going on. I'd love to play that game on mouse and keyboard, guys. If I could get Metroid Prime on PC and not have it auto-aim and aim myself with a mouse, I would do the sickest walkthrough for that game, guys. I'd do the sickest, like, challenge run. I would do something special just because of how much everyone loves that game. And maybe at the end of it, I'd love that game too. But I never played Metroid is the topic here. And it's sacrilegious. I'm going to change it. I'm going to do the old games. I'm going to play them just casually, just to see what they're about. And I'm going to do it eventually, but I've got to be in the mood for it, you know. And thus, because of that, because of never playing Metroid, because of my Castlevania fatigue, this game, to me, when people say Metroidvania, I think of this. I also kind of think of Ocarina of Time a little bit, because in Ocarina of Time you do get stuff, don't you, that enables you to go back and do other things, and I think that totally counts, right? And Ocarina of Time, to me, is one of the all-time greatest games ever made. But here's a jump cut of some weird physics and me taking out these crack fiends. So these are the lunatics, aren't they? This one was really lucky. Watch this. I beat him with the cape, and then I just smash him in the face. Sit down, son. And then we get out of there. And then we've got these guys populating Arkham. But I mentioned earlier on, guys, that one of the things I love about this game is its sense of setting and the way it uses its environment. They constantly change your expectations of what's happening. It started out with the guards, then it was the prisoners, then it was people with sniper rifles, then it was lunatics that do this kind of crazy Zerg rush, and then later on it's going to be Ivy's plants. It feels like Arkham itself is a living and breathing character in this game, and it's constantly shifting and trying to get in Batman's way. And I love that. I do not think City, Origins, or Night came even close to getting that sense of self. And don't get me wrong, they're still bangers, you know. For open world games, I don't like open world. That's why I love this. This, to me, is as open as I want it to be. It is a very focused sandbox, and I think it's stellar because of that. And then additionally, it leads me to the Riddler trophies. So the Riddler trophies in this game, they felt like something that made sense. They felt like they were part of the world. It seemed like Edward Nygma had been in prison so long, he just decided to do some kind of crazy project of putting Riddler trophies everywhere to keep himself sane because his prison sentence was... Look at this, by the way. How sick is that? Another one of those physics bugs. Like, I feel like the Riddler trophies in this felt like something that could have happened. They'd been secreted away in a clever way. And there was just enough of them that it was quite a task to do it that separated the people that loved the game from the people that just kind of liked it. But there wasn't too many of them that you looked at your map and you became so just disenfranchised and disheartened and saddened by the whole thing that the idea of finding them all was the equivalent of trying to know what every Yu-Gi-Oh card does now when there's 50,000 of them and they all summon your mum's fucking phone number from your DM and bang your dad. You know, it's crazy to me that the way they went with those, like Arkham City, absolutely just diluted and just spread it so thin that it wasn't even fun anymore. There was too much. It was so overwhelming. And if you're that kind of compulsive collectible guy, you might have liked it, but I can't imagine it did anything good for those truly compulsive people that have to pick everything up. I reckon for those guys, they probably ruined a few relationships. And then Arkham Knight was kind of the same. The only difference is it added the car, and no one liked the car. So, for me, when I think Riddler trophies, I think this game. Because to me, this game, it hit the golden variable of fun exploration that you wanted to do because the environment was good and the right amount of things to pick up to just scratch that addiction, but not to turn you into a complete, you know, neurosis freak that can't sleep. And then here we have another one of these sequences a Predator sequence against a bunch of guys, and right there I didn't want to do that, guys. I didn't mean to do that. It might have saved me, though, because I might have got seen just then. These are so interesting. I love these environments, and I love how they look in the detective vision, which is something I've not mentioned. The detective vision mechanic in this game, I think, was really clever. I think it built off of things like what Condemned was doing, and I'd love to know if they saw Condemned while they were making it and they added that feature. Because Condemned was one of the first games I saw where you followed evidence. There's probably 50 games that did it before that, but it was the first time I saw it where it was literally turn on something, it highlights something you couldn't see before, and then you follow a trail of it. And that game came out, what, in 2007? This game came out in 2009. This game was in development while that game was out. So I wonder if it influenced it at all, or if they always had that idea from the beginning, because it's not a difficult concept to think of. And it's a good concept too. It's a concept that people meme on now because it does seem a little bit silly. Batman always looking for like coffee stains and shit, and spending a week diving around Arkham City following the scent of someone's cigarette. Like it's a bit odd, isn't it? But I feel like the way it was implemented in this, it was quite fresh, it was quite new, and it enabled you to use this vision mode, and this vision mode was copied way more than that mechanic. The idea of detective mode now is so ubiquitous in video games that they just changed the industry there. And I would pose a question to people. Can you remember a game that had detective mode before detective mode? Because I know that a game will have done this. I know there'll be a game that did it. It's like when people think Gears of War invented cover, and it didn't. You know, there was that Kill Switch game on the PS2. That game was one of the first games to ever do it. There are so many games like that as well, where they come up with these cool ideas that a bigger and more successful title uses, and then becomes known for it. Like that guy that made Tetris, right? Didn't someone else like claim they made Tetris and get all the credit, and it wasn't even them? That right there's some bullshit, isn't it? I don't like that. Dude invents one of the most simplistic and complex and incredibly deep and skillful games ever made, and then some other dude steals it and steals all the credit, and you know it's happened a ton. You know, like look at Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley probably would have struggled to get published in the time she was born because women couldn't do anything but suck dick. So instead, it was published under a man's name. But it was her work, and she was an incredibly gifted writer for her age. And it's just madness, isn't it? Sexism, dude. It sucks. This fight is awesome, and look at the floor, guys. Look at the floor. This reminds me of the first time I saw that Virtua Fighter game, where there was snow on the ground, and when you moved the snow, and you deformed the terrain. This is the type of stuff that makes me excited in video games, and these are the type of details that we're missing. This is something that used to happen all the time. Thinking, that's not the word I wanted. Thinking, no. Like, destructible environments, interactive elements. All these games that didn't quite have the technology or the hardware to push this stuff were trying to push it in creative ways to give you the same impression, even though it's not the environment breaking. It's a texture changing and a couple of flat planes just being generated, and yet, in spite of those limitations, they made something brilliant. And even this, even opening the vents. I like opening the vents in this game. I think the animation's too long. I still love it. It's one of those things, you can pull those vents off with the back claw as well, but I think that animation's a bit too long as well. I would like it if there was, you know how in Gears of War, when you talk to somebody on the intercom on Gears of War 2 and forward, you can press a button to tell them to shut up and play the game. I really wish if there was standard animation on the vents, and then you could press a button where Batman just Deus Ex Machina's the vent off. Just like fucking leers at it and it flies off. Or growls or something. Kevin Conroy growls and the vent flies off. Can you imagine? That would be so sick, right? Like, I wouldn't mind if you just kicked it. Let's face it, the shit that Batman does, Batman is the most superhuman superhero who's not superhuman. And the logic of it, the reach that you have to do here, the suspension of disbelief is that he uses technology, doesn't he? He uses gizmos and gadgets and all kinds of tool belts. And his gloves are magic. They've got all kinds of science in them, and science is what makes them work. This room's kind of confusing. I thought this was a collectible at first, and I almost backed out, and then I realised you could climb up here with the claw. So don't get debated by the rooms. Some of them are obsessed with the Riddler stuff, but it's going to happen, isn't it? And then in here, there's a guy patrolling, but it's kind of hard to see, because he doesn't look like he's here, and then you drop in and he's here. Did you see that? I don't think he was there, guys. I don't. I think that guy was invisible and not spawned, and then when I dropped in, he was there. Because where he was in that room didn't make any sense. He couldn't have climbed up and walked in the time it took me to walk 2 inches and drop down. Like, I think that was something goofy going on. But once you do this, it stops the trap from being able to kill the hostages, and then you can just go and segment them and take them on, and then we can move on to the double Titan fight that's really, really easy. But look how cool Detective Mode looks. I love the colour scheme. I love the wireframe. It's such a cool aesthetic. I love the skeletons too. It reminds me of Total Recall. Anything that reminds me of Total Recall is a goddamn masterpiece. Have I mentioned that I love this game? Do you know what's really awesome about 2022 for me, guys, right now? Is I've managed to cover some games that legitimately make me happy. And I know that this is going to sound like first world and douchey, and if you're a modern gamer, you're probably going to be a bit angry at me. But modern games make me sad. I never thought I'd say that, but it's true. Modern gaming really makes me sad, because it's a bunch of trailers that sell lies that casual people think is real. They pre-order and buy them at mass, and then the games come out in a broken, buggy state, and it's just a complete and utter lie. You're being sold a pyramid scheme. You're being sold a pyramid scheme that you don't even have to sell, and you get nothing from it, because it's just absolute garbage. And it really makes me angry. And it makes me angry because I remember a time when games were like this. When games came out and they were essential, you had to be there. If you weren't there for this game's launch, what the fuck were you doing? The only thing I can think of is you don't like superheroes or you don't like action games. And that's fair. But like, if you're a gamer and you didn't get Arkham when it came out, what were you doing? Were you a PC guy? You might have been a PC guy playing shooters, or maybe a Pokemon guy, I don't know. But suffice to say, where were you? This to me, essential. This is so essential. It is industry-defining, landscape-changing to me. And modern gaming right now is, all it does, from what I see, is it makes really passionate, really enthusiastic, and really loyal gamers really sad. That's all it does. So to cover things like Condemned, and share that with you guys, and be able to say, this game is awesome, I love this game, it's such a fun feeling. And you might wonder, guys, you might think, why am I not covering modern games? Why am I not covering these new releases? You used to cover all the new releases and that was what you did. And I did that for many years and I enjoyed it. But now, these new releases, they're not as fun. They're not as fun, they're not as good. And if I were to cover them, I'd spend more time lamenting them than I did saying anything really, really helpful or interesting, because they're not challenging either. The big exception is Sifu. Sifu is incredibly difficult, but imagine if I covered Dying Light 2. I could give you some really good gameplay of parkour, some really good combat gameplay, but I hear... Did you see that? I don't know how that happened. That looked like, when it travelled through the Titan's body, it turned the hitbox off. Because I thought I got hit then, and I kind of committed to it, and you can tell. Do you know how you can tell that I knew I was going to get hit then? I panicked. I pressed B when I panicked instead of pressing A, because all of my muscle memory when I panic in games goes back to Souls and E's. And I put my dodge on E's on B, and I always have the dodge on Souls on B, because that's what it was to begin with. So if you ever see me use the back cape like that, guys, it's because I panic and my reptile brain goes back to all the games I have thousands of hours on. And I got away with it, and it got to be in the video, and I get to tell you that, which is cool, because a lot of the times, you don't get to see many mistakes in some of these videos, because they're too clean. But that time, you got to see it. And you saw it as well when that crack addict jumped out of the vent. He jumped out of the vent and I pressed B, because I panicked. And I don't know about you, but I do that. I do it so much. You know when I haven't played a game a bunch of times and bedrocked the information and woke it back up inside me? When I panic, I don't panic with the game's controls. I panic with the game I played most recently at the biggest length. And that just so happens to be vastly different games. This is awesome too, watch this. You can knock 2 people out here if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you won't even get one, you'll just get punched. But this is really cool, this, because you can take that dude out, and I enjoyed every single second of that. Everything you just witnessed, I enjoyed doing. And then we've got, it's a pretty big fight, this one too, when you don't have any of the tools. But that particular weapon, you can quick use it if you put it on, and you can use it mid-fight. And it does actually knock down a bunch of people, and it can lead to some funny stuff, but I never use it. And at the end of the game, I started using it by accident, and it was getting really annoying. Because I'm playing on a PlayStation 3 controller, if you're wondering, guys. It's a PS3 controller connected on PC. It's pseudo-wired, shall we say. And I have a problem with it that I didn't know I had before, and I came really close to getting a big knife from my kitchen and stabbing the literal fuck out of the trigger, because I got so mad. And you'll see it in my Joker fight at the end, because it was the end of the game when it started happening. For some reason, my left trigger started sticking while I was playing. I wasn't pressing it, I wasn't leaning on it, I wasn't like pressing it on my lap or anything. And it started pressing itself by itself and getting stuck. So I'd be in the middle of a fight, and Batman would start holding a fucking back claw in the air. And it would start moving weird. And I didn't know what was going on. And it was that moment, because you know when you're really connected to a game and you're super in it and you're pressing buttons and they're doing exactly what you want and you know exactly where you're going and what you're doing and you're 5 moves ahead. Well, when you're doing that and Batman starts doing weird things, it really throws you off. And it was because of the trigger. And it did it maybe 6 times during fights, and I nearly banged it on my desk. When it happened, I nearly went nuclear. Because when I'm recording, guys, when I'm doing something tricky and challenging and I'm in it, I'm probably the most autistic person you'll ever meet, dude. Like, you touch me and a tornado happens, because I'm just, it's not a good time. So when it was doing that, I just wanted to just bite the controller in half and stab my own jugular with it. And I'm probably going to do something. I might open it up and see if there's something wrong with the trigger. I might remove it, because I hate the triggers on the PlayStation 3 controller. I think they're stupid. I think they're some of the worst triggers that were ever made, and I don't know why Sony ever did them. The PlayStation 2 triggers and PS1 triggers were fine for me. They weren't technically triggers. I think you could have just curved them and they would have been fine. GameCube, good trigger. N64, good trigger. Every other fucking Dreamcast, good trigger. You know, Wii U, actually decent trigger for once. But like, you know, PlayStation just, I don't know what it is with them. They're obsessed with these like subpar triggers and they do my fucking ragging. But I do like the PlayStation 3 controller, even though I think it's kind of shit. You know, you would never normally hear me say good things about the PS3 controller, but I've been using it now for years, and it's my go-to controller on PC because it's really, really light, and I've just kind of got used to it. And I mentioned on stream the other day that my adhesive on my left analog stick has melted away because it's been a long time. I've had it since I bought the PlayStation. So to give you an idea, guys, that controller behind me, that little workhorse, I've had that controller since I think 2007, and it still works. And even the stickiness is probably my fault. I might have spilled coffee on it like 10 years ago or something. Or something might have been catching inside when I resealed it. Because I opened it up and edited it. I customized it a little bit, got rid of the rumble motors. And that pad is still flawless. It just goes to show as well in many ways. Except for the adhesive. And the adhesive is one of those things where it's going to happen. And if I opened it up, I could swap the analogs. Because I use the left analog a lot more than I use the right analog. And it would probably be better that way. But I think I'm just going to buy a bunch of them off of a cheap website. And then I'll just open them up, I'll cut away the rumble motors, and I'll just use them. Because you only have to take off like 2 screws. I think it's 2 screws and then maybe 1 screw to get rid of the printed circuit board, and then you're fine. So it's really easy. Oh, by the way, guys, these moments here, you might be wondering, Chris, how come we're seeing this? Why are you not editing them out and jumping between with those cuts? The reason for this is I'm showing you these because you can take damage. As soon as Ivy's plants took over, things got silly. And there's another little bit of a self-imposed restriction here that turns this into a nightmare. It turns it into the hardest part of the game. So what you have to do, guys, is you have to navigate this sequence without throwing batarangs at the plant's projectiles and without killing them. That's what I decided to do, because I thought it would be interesting. And you get to see a little bit more of the island as well, which I thought was quite nice. And I don't recommend doing it because it's really annoying, and these plants are super random. Sometimes you can run up to them and smash them and they don't spawn anything. Sometimes you run up to them and smash them, they spawn something and they hit you in the animation because you're not invincible. So there doesn't seem to be any real consistency. And the checkpoint on this door is absolutely terrible too. This is one of the worst checkpoints in the game. Absolutely hated every single thing about this, because this is a hard fight, this. It doesn't look hard, and if the checkpoint was good, you'd do it in a second, but you're getting so tilted having to navigate that room all the way back from that big building to come here again. And what I ended up doing is I ended up going into the Botanical Garden and getting a slightly closer checkpoint, but I still had to exit the Botanical Garden, then I had to use the line launcher, then I had to come in this room. And because I have to do that, guys, it irritates me. I don't want to play. And that's why I'm not doing Sifu, because on Sifu, if you fuck up on that game, you have to start the level from the beginning, and I don't want to do that, you know. But if you're playing Sifu right now and you're doing cool things, more power to you, because that game looks really, really cool. I love the outfit of these guys as well, because the prisoners are wearing the guard. See, do you see it there, guys? Do you see it? This is my controller trolling me. The line launcher going on just then was not me. And when it blinked up on the screen twice just then, look, it's doing it now. And I'm getting real mad. You have no idea how mad I am in that moment. Straight up, dude. Like, if you were a paedophile, I would have probably smacked you with a cricket bat. I would have took the hit, I would have restarted, and then cricket batted you. Stop fucking kids, dude. It's not cool. But instead, I just kind of got on with it, and luckily I managed to overcome it. And I get stuck a little bit here on the pipe. You'd be surprised just how awkward Batman can be in this game. Oh, and we get an awesome physics bug as well. Look at that. That was amazing. What a cool fight, right? I want to say something, though, when it comes to defending the sequels, because I have said that the sequels are not as good as this, and I do believe that. You don't want to challenge these snipers, by the way. They hit you really quickly. They're straight-up jackals when they want to be these guys. Back in 2009, snipers did not mess around. It certainly was something, wasn't it? How difficult games could be with hit-scan snipers. But in the sequels, Batman inherits his abilities from this game, which makes them really, really fun. Because if you want to do a no-upgrade run of Arkham City, you start with the ability to do the combos. I think you can even do the critical hits, and I think you can do grapples too. Ooh, that was unfortunate right there. So that guy was supposed... Did he get killed by that? He might have got killed by that, actually. So this is the very first room of the game, if you remember. The very first Predator sequence we did. And now we've come back, and the gimmick here is that all of the things that have changed in the Predator rooms are now applicable. But the difference between the initial one and this one is we now have a back claw. And the back claw here, because there's so many balconies, look how strong this is. The back claw, when there are balconies, is the strongest tool in the game. It's not stylish, it's not like the most elegant way of doing things, but it's incredibly effective. However, there's a few caveats to bear in mind. If you do this when an enemy is going towards a body at certain times, they'll react to it and they'll dodge it. And if they dodge it, they'll quickly shoot at you sometimes and it gets really scary. As long as you either get lucky or do it at the right time, they will not do that counter. Like just then, he was investigating, but it didn't work. You see, that's the problem with the physics as well. Sometimes you pull them, sometimes you don't. But the idea of this, guys, is you want to use the back claw to pull attention, and then the person that stays behind, like this guy beneath me, you can go and get him. I don't go and get him, though. I'm going to focus more on back clawing when these guys are wandering around. When there's a group of enemies like this, be very careful trying to interact with them, because they will know where it come from and they'll respond. But that guy right there, he can be pulled. As soon as he did that, he killed himself. And you can loop this. There'll be people climbing that ladder, and then you can pull them off the ladder repeatedly, and it works in every Arkham game. And if you've ever watched my walkthroughs before, you'll know that I'm a big proponent of the Ultra Back Claw, which is the one that lets you do it to 3 people. And a lot of my strategies for the challenges of this game are to bait a situation where 3 guys are on a balcony and then pull them all off. Because it's so effective. It's so effective, and it alleviates everything else. And now these guys are going to investigate, but they're behind cover, so it gets a little trickier here. On my casual playthrough of Arkham, back in the old days, I used to be a big inverted takedown guy. I love to bait people under the gargoyles and do the inverted takedown. Yeah, that's what... Oh, see, just then, that was really good as well. There's a property here that's interesting. In this game, when an enemy is falling, if you backclaw them as they fall, it gives them a status that just kills them when they land. And you can even do this as they are in a landing animation. And you can use this later on in the final boss, because the enemies jump over a balcony into the room where you are. If you backclaw them as they're jumping, you will just completely neutralize them before you have to fight them. And it's undeniably effective and incredibly strong. And then we've just got one more guy here, and I think this guy trolls me a little bit because that's just what happens in these games. He's kind of scared here too. If you were to go up to him and stand in front of him, he'd probably hesitate, because there's a mechanic in this game and in the sequels where the enemies get scared. And I think that's kind of beautiful, the idea of it, because Batman is he's a fear tactics kind of guy, isn't he? His art of war is to use everything he can against you. And one of those techniques is both the ninjutsu stuff, isn't it? The essence of surprise, the essence of intimidation. And this guy's up against cover, and he's going to do a very canned animation here. And then when he steps in this room, it's going to trigger the Y prompt, and he's lost. And he's going to step in this room unless he turns around. And he's waiting, and then he's done. And that's the end of the room. And then we get the third sequence against Scarecrow. This is my favourite Scarecrow sequence because it actually involves having a fight. But you have to do the same thing here, guys. If you step out into Scarecrow's gaze, you will be instantly felled, and you'll have to go back to the checkpoint. These segments do have plentiful checkpoints, so it's not the end of the world, but it's just a little bit boring and uninspired when you're playing, you know? And I love how these skeletons look, dude. They only die, they die in one hit, so they are one of the weakest enemies in the game, but they're incredibly satisfying too. And I would really have liked to have seen more of this in the game, because I think it's just a nice popcorn encounter that breaks up the flow of Arkham. Because face it, most of the enemies in this game are the exact same thing in a different outfit. There's a lot of outfit swapping in this game to give you the impression that it's new, when in reality it's not. And I don't think there's a single thing wrong with that. I think that's a good way of doing it. And it reminds me of the old school Final Fantasy limitations on the cartridge where they had to do, you know, palette swapped enemies and call them different enemies because they couldn't create extra enemies because there wasn't enough file size on the memory. And it just goes to show, when you have a limitation like that, you can go in there and make things interesting. It's one of the things that pisses me off the most about modern games, where their entire game is built around an animation, and they only have one. How many times are you going to watch an animation before it gets really, really frustrating and annoying? You know, you can go to games 10 years ago that have multiple animations for the same thing that you do a lot, and it gives you the illusion that you're doing it in a different way, so you don't get bored of it immediately. But the moment you get an animation where you do the same thing, it's brutal. And then if you look at a series like Dark Souls, where they have an execution in that called a riposte, there's a cut there, guys. I got gazed at and had to come back to the start of this sequence, so if you're wondering why it jumped sharply there was no real way to link it. One of those things. And then this is the final area that moves into the final encounter too, which is really nice. But Dark Souls has a riposte mechanic. Look at that, by the way. See that? That right there is apparently a gap. A gap in the matrix. I don't know why it lets you do that, but it does. And then we have a fight against skeletons that don't go down in one hit. Although, that one did, didn't he? I wonder what that is. Is it the starting combo? So they've designed them where you can get your momentum off them, and then they die in one hit on everything after that. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know if I knew that, or if I did, I'd forgot. But anyway, guys, sorry. The riposte in Dark Souls is the same animation that it was in Dark Souls following afterwards. And the biggest problem with that animation is it's essentially the same animation that it was in Demon Souls. And when you have these animations being very similar, and you spend a lot of time playing those games, you essentially burn yourself out on those animations. And if you really love the game, you come to a point where you don't even notice it anymore and you don't mind. But from a casual perspective, more animations would give you the impression that more things are happening. And in the game's defense, different weapons do have different animations, but they are limited to their weapon type. And I really think they could have made 2 or 3 animations and just made it random. Because at the end of the day, it's an animation that's quite lengthy, you're invincible in it, and all you're doing is delivering a huge piece of damage, so it doesn't change any variables. If I was in charge of that game, I would have made more animations. And I appreciate that's like 30 extra animations to make, and it's expensive because time is money, but that's what I would have done. You know, that's one of the things I really value. It's one of the reasons why, as much as I hate Modern Warfare 2019, I give that game props, because when you reload on that game, there's like 3 or 4 animations. Some of them you barely ever see. But it's awesome. There's a different animation to reload when you have a full mag. There's a different animation to reload when it's partially. There's a different animation when you empty a mag. Like, it's got all kinds of stuff going for it. And then there's a couple of just like flare reloads thrown in there, and then there's rare reloads. Like, that is cool. That is what animation should be. It should be art. It should be creative. It should be unique. But a lot of the times we get the same things. And then if you look at a game like this, Batman does random animations. See this? His counter's different. Depending on what he does, he's got a few counters. He's got a couple of slow ones, a couple of fast ones. His attack is different depending on where the enemy is. Got a couple of slow ones, a couple of fast ones. It makes a game where all you're doing is jumping between enemy to enemy, punching them or kicking them. And because he has all these different moves he can do that you don't control, it gives you the illusion that you're doing tons of different ass-kicking moves. And you kind of are, but it's nothing to do with you, and it's everything to do with the fact that they made more of them. They could have made this game where Batman did the same move to every enemy when he got momentum. It would have been a worse game for it, would have been more consistent, and I might have liked it more when it comes to challenge running, but it would not have been as interesting to watch or to play, because you would have seen that move thousands of times and you would have got exhausted. And speaking of exhausting sequences, this is Killer Croc. Word of warning here, guys. I usually don't aim the Batarang at Killer Croc, I usually hipfire it. But I hip-fired him twice on my first few attempts at this, and it worked. And then the next 2 attempts, I hit him, it didn't stun him, and he killed me. So I'm going to aim the Batarang, is what I learned from that. This is a famous sequence for me, this. Because this was the only part of the game on my first playthrough that I did not enjoy. I think Killer Croc in this game looks amazing. I think he's awesome. And I think the idea of this sequence could be really good. But in reality, this is the most boring, like scripted, lame sequence ever made. And there's a lot of technology here to stop you doing it quicker than they want you to do it, because they wanted to turn this into like a cat and mouse chase sequence. But it's not. It's just really shit. And I fucking hate it. I do. Sorry to curse a ton, guys. I know I've been swearing a lot on those Yu-Gi-Oh videos, but to really emphasize how much I dislike this sequence, every time I come back to this game, I forget about this sequence, and every time I remember this sequence, I just audibly groan, because I really dislike it. I absolutely dislike it. And here's the thing, right? I respect it. I do. I respect that they wanted to do something that wasn't just combat, and I know that some of the criticisms of Arkham is that the combat has one tone and it's repetitive. And I get that, guys. I do. I do get that. I love it, and I think that it's super fun, but not everybody's like me. And there's probably some people that think that this is a great sequence, because maybe they've only done it once and they haven't really looked into how it works mechanically, and they haven't really seen the limitations of what you do here. Because this sequence would be great if you could line launcher everywhere without getting insta-grabbed. But they put that in there to stop you doing it too quickly. This sequence would be great if you could move really quickly while doing it, and all it does is provoke Croc to attack you quicker. But it doesn't. It provokes an instant kill grab that you can't seemingly dodge. And if you can, that's awesome, but I don't know how, you know? So you can't sprint on this segment, because if you do, Croc just grabs you in a cutscene and you're done. And if you use the line launcher too much, you line launcher directly into him, and he has like a fucking 1-frame SPD. So it turns into this really awkward walking around slash running away slash following this meter readout. I just don't understand. I don't get it, guys. I don't. And it's funny too, because you know, with the way I've edited this video, this is one of the longest sequences in the game, and it's simply because there's nothing you can do to speed it up. And I've done Killer Croc probably about 15 times in my life. I've done him on every difficulty. I don't think he's ever fun. I don't think he's ever interesting, and I don't think he's... I'd love to hear from somebody. Like, if you're a guy that likes this, can you explain why you like it to me? And I'd love to hear from you, because somebody likes this. Someone at Rocksteady thought that this was right, thought that this was the way. And I don't think it is. I think this is awful. I think this is almost as awful as that challenge room where Croc turns up after you get like a 350 hit challenge. Sorry, 350 hit combo. Whoever thought of that idea is an arsehole. Because that's boring as fuck to do. It's skillful, don't get me wrong. You've got to be skillful to get a 350 hit combo, but who wants to do that? It takes like 20 minutes. I don't want to do that, you know? That's not who I am. I want to fight Croc, but I don't want to fight Croc by getting a ridiculous combo that can drop at any moment because Batman attacks a fucking bin lid instead of a person I want him to attack. Although in those games, it's a lot easier to get away from shit like that, because you can break weapons, you can do different moves, you can use different items. Can you remember in Origins, guys, where there was that move that knocked out everybody that you'd knocked down? And you jumped up and you did like a cape move, and it just twirled around you and everybody died. That cape move is so busted in that game's a joke. And it's a joke for several reasons, but that's an even bigger joke, that. Absolutely madness. But sincerely, I'd love to hear from somebody that likes this segment. And if you're just going to say, I like this segment because I like it, that's not very helpful, and you can probably avoid doing that. But if you legitimately have a good reason, I'd love to hear from you, because this made it in the full game. Testers played this and thought it was okay. Developers played this and thought this was okay. And I even saw reviewers when this game launched that thought that this segment was repetitive and dull. And it is. Because this is the definition of a one-trick pony, and that pony wasn't interesting to begin with, you know? And it's just too long. It's way too long. And here's a counter-argument, you know? I spend a lot of time saying, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. And it irritates some people, which is fine. You know, it's going to happen. You're always going to get that. Here's a good thing for those people, right? How would you fix the Croc fight in Arkham Asylum? What would you do? How would you fix it, ladies and gentlemen? In the comments now. I don't care how big it is. I don't care how hard you have to work to get that answer out. Give me your fix for this sequence of how you would make it more true to what makes Arkham Asylum fun. Because you know what I think I would do just off the top of my head? If I thought about it, I'd come up with something very detailed and deep and different. But off the top of my head, I would have this sequence like it is, but I would make it so that you only do it once. You only pick up one fruit. And what happens is you can sprint if you want to without getting auto-killed. And then when you sprint, if you sprint for too long, it brings Croc out and he jumps out of the water and you batarang him. And then when he falls in the water, he chases you. Then I would turn the chase into a much more dynamic chase where you're running away from him Crash Bandicoot style and cool things are happening, where you have to use some of your tools and things to continue onwards. And then I'd get to the fruit, he'd pick the fruit up, and what would happen is Batman would get the reading, say he needs more fruit, and then the wood beneath him would fall and it'd be like a sewage hole. And the hole would fall into a room, and the room in there would be a predator challenge where Croc was moving around. Croc could be moving around, you'd have to do an interesting predator challenge with Croc or with some people in there or whatever you want. And then when you do that, Batman jumps and hits Croc and you both fall through another floor or through a wall, and then you land in an arena and then you fight against Croc. And then the Croc fight could be, you know, it could be a circle platform where you fight him, and then when you hit him enough times and you stun him, he jumps into the water, he does some kind of shenanigans, right? You do that 3 times, he loses, and then as Batman's executing him, he hits him in the gut, and when you hit Croc in the gut, he opens his mouth and he vomits up the fruit that you need. He vomits the rest of the fruit to get the pheromone or whatever it is that we're going for here to cure the people. And that's it. And then you leave, you know? You leave, you got to fight him, you got to do some Predator stuff, you got to do this little weird sequence here that Rocksteady were in love with so for some insane reason, because it's terrible. And I think right there, ladies and gentlemen, I have fixed Croc, right? Only I don't think I have. And I'd love to hear what you think. Because to me, that would just be more interesting, personally, rather than this. But this sequence does have a lot of checkpoints, I've got to say that much. It checkpoints the living shit out of it. And I should probably say I'm playing the Game of the Year edition, and I have no idea what that means. Does the Game of the Year edition add anything, guys, except for those Joker missions that were exclusive to PlayStation? Does it just add costumes and Joker? I think that's all it does, isn't it? Because can you imagine if it actually changed the game? Do you know one of the things I'd really like to see games do? It's what shmups do. Shmups are the purest form of video games and probably the best. It's just unfortunately nobody respects them, nobody likes them, and nobody plays them. So that's kind of a rip. But what happens with those games is they are so intricately balanced to a degree of being just absolute masterpieces day one, that when people play the shit out of them and conquer them and feel really satisfied for doing so, a couple of months later, they'll release another version of the game where they completely change the balance, they completely change all kinds of aspects of it, all kinds of design elements, like where the enemies come from, or adjusting the patterns, or adjusting literally how the scoring works, or completely redesigning the game from the ground up. Keeping the same assets and everything, but changing everything under the hood so it's almost a completely different game that you play in a completely different manner. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is what patches should be. That's what DLC should be. DLC should be of that caliber and that quality, but it never is. Nowadays, it's a scoreboard in a competitive shooter that's had a scoreboard for 22 fucking years. And it makes no sense. I love this fight, by the way. This is a fight that you do in a challenge arena. And in the challenge arena, I never liked this arena, but when I've come back to it, playing it on my PC and looking so shiny and just beautiful and seeing those wonderful reflections in the water, there's something about this game. It's nostalgic, it's beautiful, it's standing the test of time. And then here we have the hardest part of the game. So this is the hardest part of the game under my challenge restrictions. It's navigating 2 corridors that have plants in them. Under my restrictions of no batarangs and not killing these items, I had to come up with this strategy here, and it almost doesn't work because it's random as fuck. So the first thing I learned about these plants is that they don't register unless you're on the ground. Their trigger is activated by your feet. And now welcome to, Batman refuses to use a tool that has 2 walls and can literally be used, as I've seen it be used the time I did this before, but now he won't use it, because he's a twat, and it triggers the monster, and now I have to dodge 3 tracking projectiles that have really, really good range and radius. And I get really lucky just then. So, there you go. But do you see this line launcher thing being a giant pile of dog shit? What a nightmare. And it's going to do it again, ladies and gentlemen. There's a really tricky line launcher coming up here, where you can space it just elegantly enough and you can get to the door and trigger the door and you've done this segment. But if it doesn't play the game, you're going to have to dodge projectiles. And if you get unlucky, you're going to hit a pipe, you're going to end your line launcher early, and you're going to be in no man's land and probably get hit by a plant. But I just thought this was delicious. Of everything you'll see me do in this video, this was the hardest. navigating 2 tunnels that you can literally run up to these plants, smash them, and if you don't get the projectile, you're fine. And you usually don't. It's like, I don't even know the chances on it, but chances are you'll be okay. And watch this. Look at this. I get completely caught, but when you touch this door, you're invincible. And that was it, guys. And the reason I kept the door opening in is because sometimes those projectiles can hit you as you're trying to hit the door. And I didn't want it to seem like it hit the door, went through the geometry and hit me through the wall, because I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. The radius on those balls hits so wide, it can probably hit you through that wall. So I kept the door in there to show you that I didn't take any damage, and then we skip now to the hardest part of the game, actually. But we're not quite there yet, but this is the room it takes place in. If you know Arkham Asylum, you know this room. This is the room where shit gets real. But before you do this, you have the control room, and the control room has a really, really cool Predator mission here. This is also an environment for the challenge rooms, and I've done this a fair few times, and I really, really like this room. On the challenge of this room, you can get the enemy's attention with like a sonic batarang, and then you can pull 3 of them off that balcony, but I don't have it right now, so I'm not going to be doing that. And I decided to do this, guys, because I didn't want to use the backclaw, because Batman stands up when he uses the backclaw, and I didn't want to run the risk of being seen, so instead, I did a 55-minute animation wrenching a giant piece of metal off a wall, and I only did that so that I have an escape strategy. But there goes the first guy. The other guy's all confused. Right now, I could probably dive kick him and knock him out. And I'm actually going to do that. There you go. Because you get... Oh, there was a weird physics thing. Look out. Dude, it cancelled the animation and it knocked him out. How cool was that? Dude, this game at 240 FPS is hilarious. I don't know, though, guys. I went back and I watched some of my old Arkham footage. I think this game might be affected by frame rate in ways that I'm not quite fully understanding. Because I saw some stuff in this run that I don't remember in Arkham from the enemy behaviour. I saw some really like odd moments of shit happening. And I'd love to know in maybe 10 years when we can truly understand this stuff and like data mine it or have people that have studied it. I'd love to see what the effect of frame rate has on some of the AI and the physics. Because one of the things that backwards compatibility has taught us, that was a mistake right there, I should have waited. But one of the things that back compat has taught us, especially with Ninja Gaiden, is that when you take a game that's designed for 2 consoles back and you play it on the new ones and you improve it on a performance level, it affects the game in unforeseen ways. And in that game, it changes the projectiles. It changes how easy it is to dodge projectiles, and it changes a bunch of variables, and it probably changes a bunch of other stuff as well. And we can test this because we have players like Godfather, like JTB, like all those Ninja Gaiden guys who have put so much time into that game. They know exactly what that game is supposed to be like and exactly what it's supposed to do. So when it starts doing different things and old technology stops working, that's worked for decades, they know that something's different. And this is an empirical, palpable, anecdotal thing that we can prove. And we can see this happening. And we can see this happening semi-consistently in spite of Ninja Gaiden's randomness. So every game is going to be affected by this in some ways depending on how it's been made, because all games are kind of different in their programming and how they're put together. And the one area that I really noticed, guys, was Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal on high frame rate changes the projectiles so that they don't have such generous tracking. It makes projectiles move at a speed where everything feels like it hits you where you're going to be instead of where you are, and it essentially turns enemies into hit scan. And then it affects their movement too. So you have enemies that have fast movement, and when you have the frame rate cranked, that fast movement gets multiplied. And they turn into... you have to see it for yourself if you've never seen it. Like the Doom Hunter on his sledge, when he decides to do that side evade, he does it so quickly. Like, he does it so fast, he covers so much territory, it's ridiculous. And then look at the carcasses. You know when the carcass does that spin attack? On high frame rate, when a carcass does that spin attack, it turns into like a 3-frame spin attack, and he does it 3 times in a row before you've even seen what he's doing. Like, the game is different. And it's fascinating to me how that can be. And because I don't understand it, I find it confusing, but I also find it really encouraging, because when we do understand it, we can start to work with it. You know, look at Vanquish. This is a really funny fight, this, by the way. At the start, if you drop down to the left where that piston is, you can backclaw 3 guys towards you, and the piston will knock them all out. And I just had to do it. As soon as I realized that that's what was happening, I had to do it. And this is not a bad fight, it's actually quite a fun fight, but the pistons will hit you too, and the amount of times Batman got overeager and got hit by a piston because I told him to go over there was pretty high. There was a lot of resets on this one. But on Vanquish, guys, because the frame rate was higher than it was on console, it ended up making it so that certain moves that would kill you didn't kill you anymore. Because they like hyper exceeded the damage threshold and they turned into a negative number instead of a positive or something. It's very technical and scientific and I don't understand it at all, but God, I love it. And it enabled you to survive things that you can't survive on console. All because of the frame rate. And I thought that that was really interesting, that. And here we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the big boy, the one you were all waiting for. So this is the Titan elevator room. This is a sequence where you have a Titan who has 3 phases, and then you have 3 separate spawns of enemies that come out of the elevators, and they're pretty big spawns too. And all of this is on one checkpoint, in the smallest room they could have possibly chosen, and in a room that not only does it have a weird area where the Titan can get stuck and glitch the game, but it also has electrified walls that can interrupt your executions, and interrupt your combo, and interrupt your moves by Batman flinching, even though it doesn't do damage. The good news is you can use these electrified walls to knock the enemies out so you don't have to punch them as much. The bad news is this is a management resource nightmare if you're going to try and do it like I'm going to try and do it, which is I'm going to try my best to just navigate the room, to kite, to essentially pick off enemies using the back claw and to get rid of them. And then I'm going to focus on the Titan when I can and use him. I'm not going to combo this room, guys. It can be done. It is very, very demanding to do it, and you have to make sure that you are always essentially leaping over enemies. Because when you leap over enemies, you get iframes, and then you can use that to your advantage to stay in the game. And I didn't want to do repeatedly leaping over enemies as a strategy, so it kind of made this room way worse to chain, and in the end, I didn't do it. And I didn't do it with full intent of not doing it from the beginning. That being said, I'd like to advertise my friend again, Godfather Dictator. If you watch his no damage run of this game, he chains this entire room. He chains the hardest room in the game and he makes it look easy. And I just gotta say, like, guy is a beast. And it's such a fun thing to watch. I've never been somebody that goes for perfect free flow performance during the fights in these games. This is the first time I've tried to do it. And that was coming back, doing it on all the smaller fights. But to do a fight like this with how this engine works and with how restrictive and limited things can be is super impressive. And it's so much more impressive now I've come back and played it, because there's times when Batman just doesn't do what he's supposed to do and you drop your combo. I've got footage, guys, of me going to elbow a guy, dashing across the room 15 meters to do it, and Batman misses. You know, I've got so much footage of Batman getting stuck, Batman attacking thin air, all this weird footage, and I know that I'm pressing the right direction, I know I'm pressing the right button, and I know it should work, but it simply doesn't. And I don't think it's anything to do with the frame rate or any kind of oddity on PC because I'm cranking the settings. I just think that this game at times is not quite as smooth and as polished as it will later be in the sequels. So to watch him do that, I was so impressed. I was so impressed by his patience to do it, and I sent him a message. I like, dude, when you chained that Titan room with the elevator, that was awesome. I bet you had to reset so many times. And he said to me, yeah, it's a really, really fucking awkward fight. And it is, you know. And it just goes to show, even a guy with Godfather's patience and just absolute unflinching determination struggled to have to repeat a bunch of times because the game is just not as good as you at times. And when you get upgrades, it gets a lot better. There's no two words about it. And in the sequels, it gets even better. But fundamentally, yeah, I think that this is the hardest fight in the game. It's not the fight, ironically enough, that I struggled with the most on the recording. That was the Joker fight, which is a fucking shambles, if you ask me. But that's for completely different reasons. This is the hardest fair fight in the game. And I think it's awesome. See that? He threw him into the wall. That's so fun. What a cool fight. What a great sequence. If this was in a bigger room, I'd like it more. I would prefer Bane to be in this room and this guy to be in Bane's room. I think that would be super sick. But I love the fact that they did this, because this is hard. There's no two words about it, guys. This is a hard sequence. For a Batman game, this is hard. This might be one of the hardest rooms in any Batman game for me. But it is a very difficult room. And then we come out now, and again, you're going to see more traversal here, guys, because the plants mean that I can take damage. And I don't want to trim out sequences where I can take damage if I can help it, so that I can show you that I didn't take damage. And if I'd have covered this in 2009, I would have done very minimal editing. I would have got rid of cutscenes, I would have got rid of deaths, but I'd have left everything else in. And you know what? I think the project would have been great as well. Because I think this game just translates really well to just being an awesome game. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's comments and just talking about what this game means to you guys, like where you were when you played it and why you liked it and what it did that kind of changed how you thought, because I feel like this is a really special game. This room's dangerous too. There's 2 snipers here and I got shot by one of them, so be very, very careful. That guy there's got... Oh, that was a plant as well. Did you see that? A plant just fired a projectile at me. But we're moving towards the end of the game here. We've got a couple of bosses coming up. One of them is Ivy, which Ivy seems really unmanageable at first, and she's a nightmare to chain on. But she's actually not that bad. You can kind of ignore her and just spam batarangs, and you'll be perfectly fine if you know what you're doing. But there's definitely a part of that fight that's a bit shit, because the telegraphing on one of her main attacks is bad. And I don't really understand it. That's one of the things that I would change if I could change the game. Because I don't think it's fair that it shows you where it's going to come, and then it comes an extra foot away from where it showed you. If you're going to telegraph where an area of effect is going to be, you need to show the precise area of effect. Because it just feels cheap when you get caught by something you knew was there, you planned for it, and it still hit you. And it's interesting too, going through this game, not picking up any of the stuff. I'm so used to doing the riddles, I'm so used to picking up the trophies, I'm so used to smashing the teeth. It took a lot of willpower, guys, to not do any of that. And you see the guy swinging? The guard swinging is an effect of the frame rate and the physics coming together. The amount of times you get really goofy swinging, weird physics stuff going on, because the frame rate's way higher, is really fun. And then from here we're going to line launch towards the Botanical Garden. And we're going to push forward in here. There's a couple of interesting stuff that you do in here. I don't know why I said couple of interesting, that's really bad English, but I do that a lot. Ooh, this is tricky too. I'm going to bait him to summon his orbs. Then I'm going to drop down. Then I'm going to listen for all 3 orbs to smash. And then I'm going to zup back up and then get past him. And once again, guys, if you want to kill these things, you can do that. It makes this really interesting. It makes this really easy, sorry. But I kind of wanted to do something dumb, and that's why I'm doing this. This is just something for me to have a bit of fun with an environmental section. This guy's the same. Watch this, though. Look how quick that was. See that? Look how fast that was. I got so lucky there. Answers on a postcard, though, for the cool cats that have made it this far. What is your favourite Arkham game and why?
Such rich food for my baby.
So when you come in here, Ivy talks to you, and it gives you the impression that you might have to do something, but it's just an empty room filled with plants. And because the plants don't attack you when you're on the line launcher, you can get to the door, trigger the animation, and get out of there before anything happens. And now it's the Ivy fight. And the Ivy fight is...
Are you ready for me?
It's kind of... I like it, you know. When I got to it, I was a little bit annoyed, because I thought it was going to be really annoying and really bad. And it's not the easiest thing to do under these restrictions, but it's nowhere near as bad as it could have been. And I learned a decent bit about it too by doing it, which is one of my favourite things about video games, when you come back to a game that you know, but you don't know it too well because you've never had to study it. When you come back and do something like this, you really start to learn what's going on. And these enemies here are affected by Ivy. Ivy's got them all mesmerised. So this is a little bit of foreshadowing to what's going to happen in this fight. And the idea here, guys, is you want to spam your Batarang, and then she's going to stick these plants into the ground, and they're going to essentially encircle you with thorns and vines. But if you watch where these come from, the vines are wider than the grass that telegraphs them. So you can't trust it. Look at that. See that? That was at least a meter wider than that telegraphing. And then when she shoots at you, you want to do what I did then. Dodge the first 2, throw a Batarang, and then dodge out of the Batarang so that you don't get hit by the next shot. So dodge 2, throw, dodge, and then run, or dodge again. And this is and then you can throw 1 Batarang then and do a dodge. And then you repeat this. So dodge, dodge, throw, dodge again, or run. And then that'll fire that at you, so you throw 1 more Batarang, and then you go back to this cycle. And that's the pattern. It's that simple. If you're playing with upgrades, you'll do this really quick because you've got better boomerangs. But the idea is just dodge first 2 projectiles. When the 3rd one fires, throw your boomerang, dodge out of it, dodge out of the next one, throw 1 boomerang, and then dodge again. And that's all you've got to do. So 1, 2, throw, dodge, dodge again, and then now you can throw one, and then you can dodge. And that's the sequence for that. In the second phase, the sequence changes, but it's not difficult. You just have to learn the new pattern is all. And then once you break her life, you have to go up to her and then spray the bat gel on the like carapace that she's got, on this protective barrier. You can use the gel if you want to stun the guys. You can do that throughout the whole game. You'll notice I don't use the gel very much. The only time I use the gel is when you have that move where you do the flip and you lay it during combat. And because you don't have that in this game, I don't think, or if you do, it's an upgrade, you'll never see me really use the gel. It's just not who I am. It's not the way I play. So here, enemies are going to start spawning, and the enemies are seemingly infinite. And when they spawn in, you can attack them and knock them off the edge and kill them really quickly. And did you see that just then? When he spawned, he interrupted my combo and flinched me, but it doesn't do damage, which is really stupid. I hate stuff like that. People landing on you and Batman goes like, ugh. Stupid. And the idea here is you can throw boomerangs while dodging these enemies and just use them as iframes and keep throwing boomerangs, and that's absolutely fine. Or you can get rid of a bunch of them, leave one, and then just kite him while throwing boomerangs. And I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to focus on these guys. I'm going to divide and conquer. I'm going to dodge Ivy, and then I'm going to focus on just one guy and then throwing stuff at her. And just be really careful, because it's super easy to take damage here. It's not a hard sequence. It just needs a bit of patience. And if you get lucky, these guys will all be knocked off at the start anyway, so you won't have to mess with any of them. But if you want to just counter like I did just then, that's a really good strategy too. But the Batclaw, dude, the Batclaw is so good. I love the Batclaw. This was risky. That was really risky, but I've been at this a couple of attempts and I was willing to take the risk. So there's nothing wrong when you're confident enough to do it, you know? But sometimes you'll do that and you'll just lose. But there's only 3 guys left. Be careful too, because if she puts the plants down when you're in that execution, you can't get away from the ridiculous... Like, just then, that was lucky. The detection on that grabbing vine is really, really stupid. And then we can throw some batarangs here. And what happens with this phase is when you get her to about half life, she goes into the other phase where she fires things at you, and then she comes back to this phase after that phase. And because you can't do too much damage due to the nature of our build, you're going to have to do both of these phases. I think this is essentially 3 phases, this. So here's the next pattern, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you throw. And then now, you get away from that. Throw, dodge, and then throw, throw, throw if you want to. You can throw 2, 3. You can throw 3 just then. So dodge all of these. And then at the end of this salvo, throw 1. And then get out of the way of that. Throw another one, dodge the barrage, and then throw 3 more batarangs. And that's the pattern. And it's very simple, and sprinting makes it so that you will never get hit. You don't have to worry about recovery, you don't have to worry about that weird slow motion that throws up your inputs that Batman does all the time. And then it goes back to what we just did. So now the enemies are going to turn up, and the vines are going to be attacking us again, and we can knock a few of these guys off. And what you should do here is just throw stuff. See this? I've realised now that on this phase, it's better to just throw things because I can't get rid of everybody and there's no point to even try. So I'm just going to jump over them, throw my boomerangs, counter them, dodge them, throw boomerangs, and as soon as it gets her down to the end, we've won. And in the grand scheme of things, I think this is a good boss in this game. I think this might be the best boss in this game. Because it's one of those bosses where you actually have to do something, and it involves fighting. And I used to hate this fight. I used to think this fight was really lame. But it's just because I always try to rush it, and it can be quite hard when you try and rush it and you don't respect it. But use the spray, it triggers the cutscene, and then I get to the part of the game where I have to apologise. So the room after this is called Party Pooper, and it's the hardest fight in the game. It is an incredibly cramped corridor with 20 dudes, and it's such a crazy fight, half the AI doesn't work because the enemies don't know what to do. I wanted to save it till after I beat Joker because it doesn't have a good checkpoint, this, guys. You have to come all the way from the side of Arkham, you have to fight these guys, you have to go through the door, then you have to do Party Pooper, and Party Pooper is very hard unless you just spam dodge and do like one safe move and then you fight for 10 minutes. So, like a dickhead, I decided to do Joker and then come back and do it when I had more time, when I was less tilted. And of course, when you beat Joker, it locks the room and you can never go back and do it. So I do not have the Party Pooper fight in this run, and I do apologise, guys, but what can you do? I'm mad that I didn't do it because I wanted to, but I'm happy that I didn't do it because it's awful. Party Pooper is hard enough when you have upgrades to do no damage, because it's really awkward. It's super awkward and you have to play like a dickhead. With no upgrades, it's even worse and it's even longer, so I essentially dodged a bullet. But this fight's interesting. This fight right here might be one of the most dynamic and unique fights in the game, because you have a ton of dudes and you have 2 titans, and it's all kinds of madness going on here. And I don't think that this is a hard fight. I got this in about 3 attempts. I think this is one of those fights that looks really difficult but isn't. And of course, if you get unlucky in Arkham, you're in trouble, because it becomes really bad. And like that just then, did you see Batman do that uppercut and get no momentum because I didn't have a combo? The amount of times Batman whiffs when you don't have any multiplier is really scary. And whenever the Titan walks at you with a purpose, it means he's going to try and punch you. He's got 2 punches as well. He has a left hook and he has a right hook, and depending on which one he does depends on how you have to react to it. You can go towards it and move away, or you can go towards it and dodge away, which is oftentimes safer. And this leads me to the thing I hate about the Titans. So I haven't mentioned this in the guide because I didn't want to, frustrate people, but it's true, it's true and it has to be said. Getting on the Titans and stunning the Titans when they have no HP is terrible. It's awful, because you don't know if Batman's going to immediately go into the animation of climbing them, or if he's going to beat them up. So there's a random chance when you're beating a Titan up that some henchman's going to come and punch you because you don't go into the animation. And I don't understand why it wasn't press B or something, or press Y. Press Y to mount the guy. If they'd have given you an input to mount the Titan, you would never get hit when you're trying to finish a Titan off, but because you can't do that and you don't know what Batman's going to do, I got hit twice on this fight because I went to a downed Titan to mount him and ride him, and Batman started doing fancy combos. And we all know how the saying goes, ladies and gentlemen. If you do fancy combo, you're going to get hit. And it happens. And I just... It's one of those things I don't really understand. Like, just then I pressed the wrong button. That was my bad. I don't get why the Batarang mid-combo is an upgrade. Do you think that's because you can knock people down and throw at them on the ground and I think it kills them? So they don't want you to be able to easily get rid of henchmen too soon because they wanted to kind of balance it? That to me sounds like a really strange omission, because Batman always uses Batarangs. It's kind of who he is, right? Batarangs and Batman go hand in hand. It seems really odd that they don't here. If you're wondering as well just then, guys, when you dodge twice in a row, but it doesn't have an interaction with an enemy, it breaks your combo. That's the reason why whenever you have one enemy, you can repeatedly dodge over him and he can't do anything. You can even dodge over the Titans when you stun them, and you can hit them, jump over them, hit them, jump over them, and build your combo like that. It's a really good way of doing that, and it's very safe. I didn't do it in this run intentionally because it's one of those strategies that to me screams, the min-maxing meta of Arkham. And I wanted this to be a bit sillier, a bit more fun, and a little different. And I hope I achieved it, because we're coming up on the end. But the slow motion in this game really confuses me too. Every so often, to emphasize what Batman's doing, the game slows down. It's like when you throw a Batarang at this guy. Watch this. See this slow motion here? It doesn't help. If anything, it eats inputs. That seems to be the only purpose of it. It eats inputs and it makes it cinematic. Every so often, the game decides to slow down in weird moments, and all I've really noticed in those slowed down moments is it isolates just how slow Batman is, and just how swift the enemies are. When Batman has all of these acrobatic moves that take too long to do, and every single prisoner in Arkham Asylum can do the swiftest straight, the most accurate and precise and quick hook, and Batman's over here doing like axe kicks after he's done 7 flips and pirouetted into some kind of like standing side flip. This guy's doing capoeira, and they're straight up just tea-kicking our tits off like a bunch of Thai kids who've already had 2,000 fights and they're 8. Like, it really is something. And right now, I'm just going to be kiting these guys because there's quite a lot of them, and I don't want to risk taking a hit when I can just finish off the Titan, ride him, knock a bunch of them down, and then get on with my life. And at the end of this, I think when you kill the Titans, you have to complete the rest of the enemies. I don't know if it's when the Titan goes down, it ends the sequence. I think you have to finish the wave as well. So it's a good idea. But did you see that? The Titan stunned himself just then. The Titan hit the wall, and then he went down. There was no ambiguity there. I didn't have to do the combo on him, and I was able to mount him really well, and that was nice. The only way that was any better is if I'd have put the line launcher on and zip line towards him. That would have been baller as hell, but that's something that I always forget to do. And then you have this moment, which is really funny. I love riding the Titans. It's one of those weird things where you can never quite be as efficient as you want to be, but every so often you do some serious damage on these big boys. And then here's the final phase. And if you're wondering, guys, why this fight is one of the more challenging ones and one of the more legendary ones for some people, is if you get hit right now and you're doing this run, you start at the beginning of everything. All those enemies that we fought, that other Titan that we've killed, all of this that we've done, I don't know why I sounded like that, I just immediately had a stroke for some reason and turned into Pee Wee Herman, but all of the trials so far that you've gone through to get here with the jumping elbow, the classic Batman move that you never won, all of this is for naught. So you have to be careful. It's the reason why I don't challenge the Titans when I stun them, because the amount of times I did that and I got punched by an enemy through the Titan. And the game's pretty good for that for the most. It doesn't happen as much as it probably would normally if you think about it. But the amount of times it can happen on other Titan fights, I learnt my lesson challenging the Titans when they're stunned. But fun fact as well for the people that like the deep lore, I tried to cover this game when my internet went out, but it wouldn't work. It was really weird. I got the game, I downloaded it at my dad's house, I brought it back to my PC, and when I installed it, it wouldn't launch. I have absolutely no idea what was wrong, but it was just that thing of everything was going wrong, everything was just fuck me, and that was just another fuck me on top of all the other fuck me, so I just assumed it was my life right then. But I think it turns out that particular version didn't have a piece of software that I needed the internet to update, and without it, it wouldn't launch. And I don't understand why it was like that, because you can get this game on GOG. And if you get this game on GOG, it's not the best version of the game, because of course it still has issues, but you can fix it. You can modify it on PC and turn it into a much better version of the game. This is the combo, by the way, what I'm doing just then. Batman goes ham for about 6 or 7 hits just then. And I don't know why he does that, because all it does is end up in you getting hit. And then here we have it, ladies and gentlemen. The hardest to record fight in the run. My least favourite, and the part of the game that tilted me so much, I legitimately ended up stopping the session frustrated and doing it the next day. And I can tell you right now, guys, this is not hard. This is 3 easy phases, but the game does not work here. The game refuses to work in this part, and I don't know why. I have so many fails on this fight of Batman attacking thin air instead of people. When there are people there and I'm holding the analog towards them, he attacks nothing. I have so many times where Batman's gone to go and do an attack and he's touched that electric fence, it's made him flinch and someone's punched me. I have so many times where I've gone to knock someone out on the ground and I've been interrupted by the fence. I've had the teeth hit me from about 3 meters away. And then I have at least 15 videos where I go to use the back claw during the fight and it grabs Joker instead. And you might be thinking, well, Chris, why would you use the back claw if he keeps grabbing the boss and ruining the run? You should... Dude, I was at the bottom of the screen and it grabbed Joker. He didn't even do his little monologue and turn around. It just grabbed him. And then the best one by far, ladies and gentlemen, I was running away from this attack on the second phase and I got stuck. I got stuck on that panel on the left-hand side of the screen. Do you see that square panel that's off the, like the hexagon? I just got stuck. I couldn't fucking move. And nothing I did would let me move. And it was the third phase. All I had to do was finish him off, and I just couldn't move. I can't tell you how unlucky I got with this fight. It ended up taking... I think it took about an hour and a half to do. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot compared to some of the stuff I've done before, but it's a hell of a lot when it's an easy fucking fight on a shit boss on a game that you should have finished the night before. The amount of times I... Like, look, did you... You did! Did you see that? Why was that too far away? Why was that too far away? And if he was too far away, why didn't Batman attack that other guy? I was holding to the right on the analog then. He apparently went for the guy with the gun, and he was too far away, and he did a spin kick on thin air. Even on the fucking finished run, Batman's being a cunt. And then on top of this, my controller was trolling me, and it kept on pulling out the fucking gadget mid-fight, which was so aggravating. And just then, the line launcher, I didn't pick the line launcher. I don't know why he has the line launcher on. I had the line launcher on just then because God hates me. That's the only thing I can think of. Because I had a few attempts on this where I missed the opportunity to pull him down and had to fight another wave because Batman kept putting on the line launcher. There was a fucking ghost in my controller that was pressing the line launcher. And it pissed me off so much, guys. I was getting really mad. Really mad. Compared to the shit we've done in this game, this should have been free. This should have been so free, and instead, I was here for ages. Absolutely ages. I can't even begin to tell you how annoyed I was at it. And then the worst part, I thought I'd got everything correct when I recorded. I uninstalled the game, and then it turns out my intro fight, I broke the combo instead of fully linking it. So I had to download the game again and redo the first fight. And you know what was really nice though and really validating? I came back to the game, having had like 3 days off after doing this recording, and I did the first fight one attempt. Chained the whole thing, absolutely kicked ass, felt really sharp, really toned, just really experienced. And that's the cool thing about, you know, playing a game and playing it a lot and doing something interesting with it, is you get real sharp and real capable. And I'm telling you now, guys, if I'd not had all the mental damage that this fight did to me, I think I would have done this fight in 20 minutes. But the mental damage was so strong, I was in a bad place. It was so funny. Looking back, it was really funny because the game... Guess what, guys, right? My second attempt on this fight, I got to this right now, end of the fight, and I threw a boomerang at those teeth, and he was about 2 meters away, and it hurt me. And I think that was the thing that set it all off, you know? I think by having that happen, it fucked me for life. But thank you for watching, and you take care now.
What's he doing?
Stay where you are.
Get a flashlight! Get a light on him!